How's it going, Action Family? I wanted to reach out and go over one of the books that I'm working through right now. It's called Permission to Feel, and it's a book that focuses on emotions and kind of just some theories going around. And I mean, for me, anytime I'm reading, a lot of this goes back to, how can I apply this to what I do as a martial arts instructor? How can I use this as a resource to parents? And a lot of this is more about, you. The book is often about you. But when I hear it, I'm also thinking in an application mindset as well. And I wanted to kind of share some of the information in hopes that, maybe you'll pick up the book and read it yourself, or that, you'll kind of look into the ideas a little bit more. So a lot of the book circles around like a method of framing emotions, and they use what they call the ruler method, or at least the author does, and he kind of centers his book around that. And the ruler method is this, right? It's an acronym. It's RULER. So the first R is recognize, recognizing the emotions kind of as you feel them. That even if you're not really paying attention to how you feel, it's something that maybe that is something that you take the time to do a little bit more of. So, kind of give yourself time to pause and really just think, like, how do I feel? What am I feeling right now? Especially when you do recognize some kind of emotional shift. Maybe you can't identify it right away, but you recognize a shift has taken place. So that's the first R is recognize. You understand. So then once you kind of recognize that a shift has taken place, trying to understand why, what was the trigger for that? What was the transition from one feeling into another? And this isn't just, negative emotions. It's also like when you go from a negative emotion to a more neutral or a positive emotion, what was that? What preceded that? What was the trigger for that? What was your thought process that brought you kind of to that better state? But especially, when we're thinking about negative emotions, if we want to avoid those negative emotions, what are the things that tend to set us off? So the U is understand. Understand what brings us into that emotional state. L is label. So one of the problems that we tend to have overall as a society is that we have a limited emotional vocabulary, and part of it is just because in general society doesn't usually really support very open discussion about emotions. So what we tend to do is just kind of label things in very general terms and give our perfunctory, responses when people are like, oh, how are you doing? You give your normal kind of, oh, I'm fine, I'm good kind of responses, even though there's probably a lot more nuance to that we could be exploring, and we tend to limit ourselves through our vocabulary just with repetition. So labeling is actually trying to get, a little bit more familiarity with, what emotion is what. Which emotion are we feeling? If we're angry, are we really angry, or are we frustrated? Are we irritated? Are we, just slightly irked? And what nuances do those different emotions give when we're trying to explain how we feel? So that's kind of the next one, is making sure that we can, as accurately as possible, label the emotions. And this book actually really does have a good, like add-on in the book and online, where you can kind of go and like get a better idea within the quadrants of emotion, like which emotion is which. So I recommend that you look into that. The next one is expression. How do we express the way that we feel? So like if we're angry, how do we express that? Do we shut down? Do we explode? All that stuff. And that's also kind of really important, because sometimes it's just all or nothing. We finally hit our tipping point and we explode out, or we burst out, or we kind of feel shame in expressing emotion that we shouldn't feel any shame feeling. That's a weird way to say that. But we shouldn't feel the kind of shame that we think we need to have when expressing certain emotions, and we tend to just kind of close that off. And the last one is regulate. So how do we regulate what we're feeling to actually fit into emotional standards a little bit better. So all of these kind of create this framework, recognize, understand, label, express, and then regulate. It creates a framework of how to process our own emotions and really try to be as healthy as we can. But the reason I'm mentioning this, in our martial arts website group, is that we're going back to school soon, and we're going to see a lot of emotional dysregulation. Students are going to come home frustrated with something that happened at school, and maybe they don't want to tell you. And this goes kind of back to building a good connection on the video that I talked about before. Being able to connect with your child in a way that gets them to express their emotional state. And this goes into another parenting skill along with connection. It's called attunement. And it's maybe you don't know exactly what's going on, but you do notice that something is off, or that they're behaving in a way that's not necessarily consistent with how you think they would be feeling. And again, part of building a better connection is to be more in tune with how they're feeling. And again, the book I think is really good because the concept of emotions, we hear a lot, like kids nowadays are soft, and sometimes that will guilt us. Not guilt us. Sometimes it'll make us second guess whether or not we should be letting our kids express themselves emotionally. And obviously there are definitely limits to what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. But I think sometimes the fact that things are appropriate or inappropriate kind of stop us from really trying to get to the bottom of it. There's a threshold that, when a kid lashes out at someone else, we're like, okay, that's it. I don't really care how you feel. That wasn't cool. That wasn't appropriate. And, I see a lot of that in, in kind of like disciplinary activities like martial arts can be, where it's just like, eventually it's like, no, like, chudiyut, you need to be in your spot. And what we tend not to do is kind of sit down and think like, why are they behaving that way? And even though I always have to be respectful of the other students in class, that's something that I try to be extremely mindful of. It's like when kids are running around and just kind of being playful when they're supposed to be paying attention, I could have a snap judgment and just think like, oh, like that, it's disrespectful, it's disobedient. But I try to put myself in the kid's shoes, and I think that could be something. I mean, this will vary parent to parent, but I think this is something that we might overlook in how important it is with our kids, and making sure that we are trying to stay as in touch with how they're feeling. And then, going back to, why I think this book is important, knowing the different emotions that we feel so that we can start labeling them and using them as vocabulary within the house, or for me, within the classroom. I try not to just say angry. I like to say things like frustrated. I like to say, irritated. Give different nuanced labels to different emotions, and sometimes help them connect the dots. Are you feeling a little bit angry and sad? Are you feeling a little bit angry and jealous? And try to guide them. It's like, oh, well, that means that you might be feeling left out, you might be feeling rejected. And I think it's important to start to build those, because now more than ever, the emotional well-being of kids is, I think, highly it's recognized how important it is, but it's still in many ways not focused on nearly enough. So what I would try to recommend is really try to be in tune with what your kids are feeling. Look at that kind of ruler principle. Where do we see a shift in their behavior? Be attuned to that. Understand where they're coming from. And if you don't understand, try to understand. Even if what they did is completely unacceptable, still try to get to the root of what caused that, where they're coming from. and help them identify those emotions, because once we can label everything, we can actually get to the concepts of expression and regulation. If we know that this smaller feeling is ramping up to this bigger feeling, once the kids are labeling, it's like, I'm starting to feel blank, then we know it's time to let the kid get their space, and to kind of take their time to process through what's going on. So it all kind of builds off itself, and they'll build off each other. And I think that's important for us to recognize. It's something that I try to do as much as I can in class, but I can't stress how important I think it might be, kind of in the actual household. And why is reading a book like this, I mean, to me, why is it important? Because kids are often going to be looking at you for cues. So like, if you're frustrated and that leads you to kind of yell out at them, or kind of snap, they're learning that. Or what they're learning is that when they start expressing their emotions and then they get snapped at, that it's not okay to feel emotions. And as they learn that, they will start to kind of shut down and withhold, and it kind of breaks that connection that you could build with them, to help them kind of get through their emotional process a little bit better, until they can regulate more themselves. So this is all just kind of stream of consciousness, what I've been thinking about as I'm reading, how I apply it to what I'm doing. And if in any way possible it could help you guys at home, I'd love to share that. And I wanted to share that. So let me know what you guys think, and if this could be helpful in some way, shape, or form. And let me know if it does play out in any way. Let me know in the comments how that happened, and because maybe that can help other parents as well. All right, guys, take care, and I'll see you next time.